Chapter 1. The First Loss. The morning mist clung to the streets of Boise, Idaho like a memory that refused to fade. Eleanor Reed stood quietly by the window of the small, two-bedroom house she had shared with her parents her entire life. Her fingers pressed against the cold glass, unmoving, as if hoping that time itself might freeze. The door creaked open behind her. "Ellie," came Nathan's voice, low and heavy. "The service starts in an hour." She didn't turn around. "I know." There was silence between them, thick and suffocating. 2 weeks ago, a car crash had taken the lives of their parents on a quiet Sunday morning. A red light ignored. A drunk driver. 2 lives gone in an instant. And now, at just 17, Eleanor was parentless. Her brother Nathan, 10 years older and long since moved out, had suddenly become the only family she had left. "I laid out your black dress," Nathan added, softer this time. "I'll wait in the car." When the door closed, Eleanor finally turned away from the window. The house felt foreign now, hollow, echoing with memories she wasn't ready to remember. Photos of happier days stared back at her from the walls. Her mother's favorite mug still sat in the sink. Her father's boots remained by the door. She walked into her parents' room. The bed still unmade from the day before the accident. Sitting on the edge, she clutched her mother's scarf to her chest and let the first tears of the day fall freely. The scent of lavender still lingered faintly. It wasn't fair. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. At the funeral, Eleanor stood stiffly between distant relatives she barely knew. People came up to offer condolences, words that felt empty, rehearsed. They were wonderful people. Gone too soon. "You're strong, Eleanor." She wanted to scream. She didn't feel strong. She felt broken. Nathan, in a black suit that didn't quite fit his usually laid-back style, stood next to her like a statue. He didn't cry. He didn't speak. He only watched, jaw clenched tight, his hand occasionally brushing against Eleanor's shoulder as if to say, "I'm here," but she could feel the distance between them growing with every passing second. When the service ended, Nathan drove them home in silence. Eleanor stared out the window, watching the world move by, detached from it all. "I've made arrangements," Nathan said suddenly, keeping his eyes on the road. "You'll stay with me now." "In Seattle." "What?" She blinked. I still have school here. I already talked to the district. You'll transfer." "You didn't ask me." "I didn't think I needed to," he replied, voice clipped. "You're still a minor." Eleanor's fingers curled into fists. "That's not fair. This is my home. I didn't even get to say goodbye properly." Nathan exhaled sharply, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Life's not fair, Ellie. We do what we have to. I'm trying to keep you safe." She bit her lip, holding back the urge to argue more. It wasn't the time. Not today. That night, Eleanor sat on her bed, staring at the ceiling of the room she'd soon leave behind. The moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting long shadows. Her suitcase sat by the door, half-packed. In just 2 days, she would leave behind everything she knew. Down the hall, Nathan was in their father's office, calling lawyers, emailing school officials, arranging logistics. Always in control. Always making decisions for her. But behind those actions was something else, fear, maybe. Grief twisted into discipline. A need to keep everything together because if he didn't, he might fall apart too. Eleanor didn't understand it then. All she felt was the weight of control tightening around her like a rope. She missed her parents. She missed her life. And now, even her choices were being taken away. The house was quiet. Too quiet. And in that silence, 2 people, both grieving. Both lost, sat in different rooms, divided by pain they hadn't yet found words for. Tomorrow would begin a new life. But tonight, it was still about surviving the first loss. Chapter 2. The Weight of Rules. Seattle was cold in a different way than Boise. It wasn't the chill in the air, but the dampness, the constant gray skies, the drizzle that seemed to never stop. It seeped into Eleanor's bones the same way the silence between her and Nathan did. Their new apartment was in a modern building in Capitol Hill, not far from where Nathan worked. The unit was clean, bright and sterile, like a model home no one had truly lived in. Eleanor's room had a desk, a new twin bed, and white walls that made her feel like she was in a guest room. Temporary. Uninvited. On the first morning, Eleanor walked into the kitchen, still groggy. Nathan was already up, coffee in hand, dressed in a collared shirt and slacks, his laptop open on the counter. "Morning," he said without looking up. "You have school orientation at 10. I'll drive you." "I can take the bus," she mumbled. "No, I'll take you." Eleanor opened the fridge and stared blankly at its contents, rows of neatly stacked containers, eggs, milk, fruit. No snacks. No leftovers. Just order. "I made a weekly schedule," Nathan added, finally looking at her. "It's on the fridge. You'll have school from 8 to 3, then tutoring on Mondays and Thursdays, and volunteer hours at the library on weekends. It'll help with college applications." Eleanor's breath caught. "You scheduled my life?" "I'm trying to give you structure," he said, almost defensively. "It's important." "Did it ever occur to you that maybe I just want to breathe?" she snapped. Nathan's expression didn't change. "You've been through a lot. This will help." Eleanor turned away, her hands trembling. She wasn't angry at the schedule itself. She was angry at what it symbolized, his control, his assumption that she couldn't make decisions for herself. The same hands that had once held hers at their parents' funeral were now building invisible walls around her. School was no better. Being the new girl in the middle of the semester meant awkward introductions, forced smiles, and whispered questions. Eleanor kept her head down, her hoodie up, and tried to disappear between the rows of lockers. At lunch, she sat alone by the window, her sandwich untouched. She watched the rain trail down the glass in thin lines. A girl from her biology class passed by and smiled kindly, but Eleanor didn't have the energy to return it. By the time Nathan picked her up that afternoon, she was silent. He didn't ask how her day was, just drove. The car was filled with the low hum of news radio. That night, Eleanor found the weekly schedule again. She stared at the blocks of time, color-coded. Efficient, perfect. But none of it asked her what she wanted, what she felt, what she missed. She took a marker from the kitchen drawer and, with one swift stroke, crossed out Saturday 10 a.m. Library volunteer. The next morning, Nathan noticed. "You crossed this out," he said, holding the paper. "Yeah, because I don't want to go," she replied flatly. "This isn't optional." "I'm not a robot," she shot back. "You can't control everything I do just because Mom and Dad are gone." Nathan's jaw clenched. "I'm trying to keep you from falling apart." "I'm already falling apart," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You just don't see it." A long silence passed. Nathan set the paper down slowly. "Finish your breakfast. You'll be late for school." And that was it. The conversation dissolved, like so many before it. Days turned into weeks. Eleanor began keeping secrets, not dangerous ones, but quiet rebellions. Skipping a tutoring session. Staying longer at school just to sit in the library alone. Listening to music under her blanket at night instead of sleeping. And each time Nathan asked where she was or why she didn't follow the schedule, she gave half-truths. Because in this apartment, there were no hugs, no shared dinners, just reminders, alarms, checklists. She didn't hate her brother, but she was drowning in his expectations. The only place she could breathe was on the rooftop of their building, late at night. She'd sneak up there, stare at the lights of the city, and pretend she was somewhere else, somewhere warm, where grief didn't feel like a chain, and where love wasn't measured in rules. One night, as the rain finally stopped, Eleanor sat on the rooftop wrapped in her coat, knees drawn to her chest. She whispered into the wind, "I miss you, Mom." I miss you, Dad. I don't know who I am without you, and I don't know who he is either. She didn't know Nathan had once stood on that same rooftop too, many nights before, also looking up, also lost, also asking questions into the void. But neither of them knew how to say it aloud. Not yet. Chapter 3. Cracks in the Glass. It was a Saturday morning when the final crack appeared. Eleanor sat at the kitchen counter, stirring her cereal until it turned soggy and gray. Across from her, Nathan was already dressed in a charcoal hoodie and jeans, typing furiously on his laptop. His coffee sat untouched beside him, steam curling into the air like the tension between them. "You're late for your shift at the library," he said, not looking up. "I told you, I'm not going." "You told me that once." "I told you it wasn't optional." Eleanor sighed. "You can't keep saying that. I'm not a project you're managing. I'm your sister." Nathan's fingers stilled on the keys. Slowly, he lifted his gaze to her, eyes tired and red-rimmed. "And I'm the only thing standing between you and chaos." "Maybe I need a little chaos," she snapped. "Maybe I need to figure things out on my own." Nathan leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. "That's exactly what I'm trying to prevent." "You think I enjoy this? You think I like waking up every morning wondering if you're going to disappear again?" The words landed hard. Eleanor's breath caught. "Disappear?" He looked down, jaw clenched. "I don't sleep much. Not since the funeral. Every time I hear the door creak, I think you've left again." "I never left before," she whispered. "Not until you made it unbearable to stay." The silence that followed was a knife. Nathan rose from the table. "You don't see it, but I've given up everything to take care of you. My friends, my time, my peace. And all I ask is that you follow a schedule so you don't fall apart." Eleanor stood up too, her chair screeching against the tile. "I didn't ask you to give up anything. I didn't ask you to be my father." His voice rose. "Well, he's not here anymore, is he?" That broke something in both of them. Nathan's face crumpled, just for a moment, before he turned away. Eleanor's eyes blurred with tears. She hated yelling. She hated this space, this life, this version of her brother. Without a word, she grabbed her hoodie and stormed out the front door. She didn't know where she was going, only that she needed to be anywhere but there. The air outside was brisk, stinging her cheeks as she walked past block after block. Her feet led her to a small park she'd found weeks ago, tucked between apartment buildings, with benches facing a dry fountain and rusted monkey bars. She collapsed onto a bench and let herself cry, quiet, exhausted sobs. A woman in her 60s sitting on the far end gave her a polite, concerned glance, but didn't approach. Eleanor was grateful. She didn't need sympathy. She just needed space. After a long while, she pulled out her phone. No new messages. No missed calls. Nathan hadn't tried to reach her. That stung more than the argument. Back at the apartment, Nathan sat on the couch, staring at the door Eleanor had slammed shut hours ago. The room was too quiet. The open laptop on the counter had gone to sleep, just like the part of him that used to feel in control. He checked his phone again. Nothing. His mind kept flashing back to the last thing she said. "I didn't ask you to be my father." He wasn't her father. He knew that. But ever since that night, when the officers knocked on his door and told him his parents were gone, he had switched into a mode he didn't know how to turn off. Responsibility. Logic. Control. Because feeling anything would have destroyed him. But Eleanor, she didn't need a warden. She needed a brother. And he hadn't been one in a long time. That evening, Eleanor returned. The key still worked. She stepped in quietly, expecting more cold silence or maybe another fight. Instead, she found Nathan sitting on the floor of the living room, surrounded by old photo albums and their parents' belongings, stuff they hadn't unpacked since the funeral. The apartment smelled of the candle their mom used to love, vanilla and cedar. He looked up when she entered. "Hey." She hovered by the door, awkward. "Hey." I was looking through some of this, he said, patting the album. I forgot how small you were when you lost your first tooth. Eleanor stepped closer. I forgot how curly your hair used to be. They shared a small, weary smile. Nathan closed the album. I owe you an apology. She blinked. You do. I've been trying to protect you the only way I know how, he said. But I realize I never gave you a chance to grieve, or breathe, or just be. Eleanor swallowed. Her throat ached. I know I'm not Dad, Nathan continued. I didn't mean to replace him. I just didn't know how else to keep you safe. She sat down beside him. I didn't leave because I hated you, Nathan. I left because I was drowning. You were everywhere, and I couldn't hear myself think. Nathan nodded slowly. Maybe we both lost more than just them. A silence stretched between them, but this one wasn't sharp. It was soft, like the space before healing. We can try again, Eleanor said. But I need to have a say. I need to feel like my life is mine, too. Nathan looked at her. Deal. And just like that, a small crack in the glass of their relationship let the light in. Chapter 4. The Goodbye That Wasn't. A week had passed since their conversation on the living room floor. The apartment felt different now. Not perfect, not whole, but softer. The cold efficiency had been replaced by small, tentative signs of change. Eleanor helped cook breakfast one morning. Nathan offered her a ride without reminding her of the time. The schedule on the fridge remained, but parts of it had been erased and rewritten with her input this time. Still, something lingered in the air. A quiet tension. A hesitation. Eleanor sat by the window one afternoon, legs tucked under her, watching the city lights flicker through the fog. She hadn't told Nathan, but she'd been thinking a lot about leaving. Not out of anger this time, but because she needed to prove something to herself. That she could survive. That she could stand on her own without disappearing. Nathan came home later than usual that evening, his steps heavy, shoulders slumped. He offered a tired smile and collapsed onto the couch. Rough day? She asked. 2 back-to-back meetings. 1 lost contract and a code bug that made the entire dev team cry, he groaned. Eleanor laughed, a sound that surprised them both. I've been thinking, she said after a pause, her tone quieter. About going back to Boise. Nathan's expression changed instantly. The air thickened. I know it sounds sudden, she continued quickly. But I've been in touch with Miss Hanley, my old English teacher. She said I could finish senior year remotely. I found a shared apartment listing. It's small, but affordable. I could get a job. Nathan didn't speak for a long time. When he finally did. His voice was calm, too calm. So, you're leaving. It's not like that. I want to try. To see if I can live without losing myself. His eyes dropped to the floor. You think I'll smother you again? No. I think you're learning. We both are, she said gently. But this is something I have to do. He nodded slowly, swallowing hard. You'll need help with rent? I've saved a little. I was hoping you could help with the deposit, but after that, I want to do it on my own. Nathan leaned back, closing his eyes. When? Next Friday. Silence again. And then, softly, okay. The days passed in a strange, quiet rhythm. They shared more meals. More stories. Nathan told her about their dad's college days. Eleanor shared the poem she'd written for their mom but never read aloud. Neither said it, but they both knew they were counting down. On Friday morning, Nathan helped her load her 2 duffel bags into the car. The drive to the bus station was short, but every red light felt like a stolen minute. They stood at the gate in silence, bags at their feet. Eleanor turned to him. You okay? He nodded, then shook his head. No, but I will be. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a folded note. Don't read it now. Wait till I'm gone. He took it, fingers trembling slightly. Ellie. She wrapped her arms around him, tighter than she ever had before. I'll be okay. You'd better call, he murmured, voice rough. I will. The final boarding call echoed through the terminal. She picked up her bags and turned, walking toward the bus without looking back. She knew if she did, she might not go. The bus pulled away. Nathan stood on the platform until it vanished down the street. Then, slowly, he unfolded the note. Dear Nathan, thank you for trying. Thank you for not giving up, even when I did. This isn't goodbye. It's just me learning to be the person you always believed I could be. Love, Eleanor. His hands tightened around the paper. And for the first time in years, he allowed himself to cry, not from grief, but from the ache of letting go with love. Chapter 5, Rain on Burnside Street. Portland was damp and restless, its skies always threatening rain. Its sidewalks littered with fallen leaves that stuck to shoes like quiet warnings. Eleanor stepped off the Greyhound bus with 2 duffel bags, a folded apartment lease in her jacket pocket, and a lump in her throat she refused to acknowledge. She tugged her hoodie tighter around her face, staring at the unfamiliar streets of Burnside like she was trying to read a map that didn't belong to her. A chilly breeze slapped her face as she adjusted the straps on her bag and crossed the road, dodging cyclists and the roar of traffic. This was real now. No one waiting with hot chocolate. No familiar voice to say, let's go home. Just her, the city, and the weight of her own choices. The apartment was smaller than she remembered from the listing, barely enough room for the twin bed, a small desk, and a kitchenette that looked like it belonged in a dollhouse. The radiator wheezed like it was struggling to survive winter, and the ceiling leaked a slow drip near the window. But it was hers. She unpacked in silence, lining her books along the shelf, folding her sweaters, and pinning up a photo of her parents next to her mirror. She placed the note Nathan had written her years ago, proud of you. Always. Just beneath it. That night, she lay on her mattress under a second-hand blanket, listening to the neighbors above thump and shout through paper-thin ceilings. She stared at the crack in the plaster above her and whispered, "You wanted this. Don't fall apart." But the truth was, part of her already was. The next morning, she put on her cleanest jeans, pulled her hair into a tight ponytail, and walked 3 blocks to the coffee shop called Brightside Brew. It was a cozy space tucked between a florist and a tattoo parlor, with handwritten chalk signs and string lights in the window. She'd applied online 2 weeks ago and now had an interview with the manager, a woman named Kim. Eleanor Reed, a voice called as she stepped inside. She turned to see a woman in her early 30s with short purple hair and a kind smile, wiping her hands on an apron dusted with flour. "I'm Kim. You're early. That's a good sign." "Thank you," Eleanor said, nerves fluttering in her stomach. "I've worked in food service before." Kim motioned to a table near the counter. "Sit with me a sec." They talked. About school. About customer service. About waking up at 6 a.m. to open the shop. "You seem reliable," Kim said. "We'll try you out. Part-time for now, weekend mornings, and 2 weekday closings. Think you can handle it?" "I can," Eleanor said without hesitation, though her chest thudded with anxiety. "I will." Kim smiled. "Start Monday." As Eleanor stepped back into the cold with the first hint of hope in her chest, she allowed herself a tiny grin. It wasn't much, but it was a beginning. By Wednesday, the novelty had worn off. She burned her hand on the espresso machine. She forgot a woman's decaf oat milk latte twice. Her shoes were soaked from walking in the rain because she couldn't afford waterproof boots. And when she got home, she found a cockroach in the cupboard. She sat on the edge of her bed, staring at the unopened cup noodles on the counter. Her stomach growled, but her hands wouldn't move. She missed Nathan's boring breakfasts. She missed having someone to talk to, and for the first time in weeks, she whispered aloud, "Maybe I wasn't ready." The lights flickered. The rain came harder. But she didn't cry. On Friday, during the closing shift, she stayed behind to sweep the floors while Kim counted the till. "You did good this week," Kim said, tossing her the mop bucket. Tired? Always. Kim laughed. Welcome to adulthood. Eleanor hesitated. Did you ever feel like running back home? Kim leaned on the counter, her eyes thoughtful. All the time. But every time I didn't, I found out I was stronger than I thought. Eleanor nodded slowly. I guess I'm still waiting to feel strong. You will, Kim said. Usually right after something breaks you. That night, Eleanor walked home in the dark. Rain hit her face like tiny needles. As she reached Burnside Street, she saw a man passed out near the bus stop, his arms curled around a duffel bag. No one stopped. Eleanor hesitated. Then, slowly, she stepped forward, removed her extra scarf, and tucked it gently under the man's head. She didn't say anything, but as she walked away, something inside her shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but like a small light flickering to life in a very long tunnel. She was still afraid, still tired, but maybe, just maybe, she was doing okay. Chapter 6, Noodles and Nostalgia. It was nearly midnight when Eleanor arrived home. The rain had finally let up, but her clothes were still damp. Her shoes squelching with every step across the worn linoleum of her apartment floor. She dropped her bag by the door and peeled off her hoodie, now heavy with water and the faint smell of espresso and bleach. The radiator let out a weak hiss, but barely warmed the room. She rubbed her hands together, breath visible in the cold. On the counter sat the same unopened cup of instant noodles from 2 nights ago. She stared at it like it might disappear if she waited long enough. Her stomach rumbled. With a sigh, she filled the kettle and set it to boil. As the water heated, she shuffled over to her small desk and flipped open her journal. It wasn't filled with poetic thoughts or grand dreams, just fragments. To-do lists, notes to herself, scribbled worries in uneven handwriting. But tonight, she found a blank page and wrote something different. Day 13, still here. Got my first paycheck today. Burned myself twice. Forgot a regular's name. Saw a man sleeping on the street. Gave him my scarf. Didn't cry. Maybe that counts for something. The kettle whistled softly. She poured the water into the cup, watching the noodles curl and rise like memories resurfacing. She sat on her bed, knees pulled up, and ate slowly. One bite, then another. And, suddenly, it wasn't just food. It was a reminder of late nights at home, Nathan microwaving noodles when their parents worked late shifts. He'd always overfill the water and leave the seasoning clumped in the corner, but Eleanor never complained. They'd sit in front of the TV, watching reruns of Mythbusters, both pretending they didn't hear the argument their parents had the night before. She remembered Nathan teasing her about putting ketchup in noodles. She remembered laughing with her mouth full. And now the silence tasted heavier than the soup. She stared at her phone. Still no messages. Still no calls. She wasn't angry at Nathan, but she wasn't ready to reach out either. Her fingers hovered over his name in her contact list. Nathan Reed. No photo. No emoji. Just the stark name of the person she used to trust without question. She pressed her thumb on the screen, hesitated, then locked the phone and tossed it on the bed. Not tonight. The next morning was Saturday, and Portland's sky was painted a pale gray. Eleanor had the day off, her first in 2 weeks. She could have slept in, but her body had adjusted to early mornings. She rose at 7, showered quickly in the barely warm trickle of water, and headed to the local thrift bookstore. She didn't have much money to spend, but books were her only indulgence. The store smelled of paper and rain-soaked wood. She wandered the aisles slowly, fingers trailing along spines, letting the titles speak first. That's when she saw it. A thin, dog-eared copy of The Little Prince. Her mother used to read it to her before bed, her voice soft, full of wonder. What is essential is invisible to the eye, she would say, tapping Eleanor's nose. Without thinking, Eleanor picked it up and held it to her chest. Later that evening, Eleanor returned home, curled under a blanket with the book in her lap, and read every word slowly. When she reached the last page, her eyes welled up, but she didn't cry. Instead, she reached for her journal and wrote. Day 14. Bought a book. Felt like Mom was in the room. Remembered Nathan's noodle mistakes. Missed them both. Still here. She closed the journal, set it aside, and finally picked up her phone. No missed calls. But this time, she dialed. It rang twice. Then 3 times. Then voicemail. She didn't leave a message. But she smiled softly to herself. Because the act of trying, that was something. Chapter 7. A Stranger's Kindness. Sunday mornings were usually quiet on Burnside Street, shops slow to open, buses less frequent, and the sidewalks damp from dew and last night's mist. Eleanor wrapped her scarf tightly around her neck as she stepped outside with a grocery list in her pocket and 10 crumpled dollars in her wallet. She needed eggs, bread, and a bottle of dish soap if the math worked out. The corner store on 14th was a cramped, dusty place with flickering lights and faded signs. Eleanor liked it more than the big chain supermarket because the owner never asked questions or looked at her twice. She could exist there, no stories required. As she was reaching for a loaf of white bread, a sudden cough erupted beside her. She turned to see an elderly woman, maybe in her late 70s, hunched over slightly with a large canvas bag tugging at her arm. Her coat was far too thin for the weather, and her gray hair was damp, clinging to her forehead. "Are you okay?" Eleanor asked, instinctively stepping closer. The woman nodded, patting her chest. "Just a little winded, dear. These old lungs don't like the cold. Do you want to sit for a moment?" Eleanor offered, pointing to a bench just outside the store window. "I'll be fine. Thank you, though." The woman gave a grateful smile. "You remind me of my granddaughter. She used to shop with me here before she moved away." There was something in the way the woman's voice dipped at the end of that sentence, soft and unfinished. Eleanor hesitated, then asked, "Do you need help carrying your groceries?" The woman blinked, as if surprised someone had offered. "Well, if you don't mind." "Not at all." They walked 4 blocks together. The woman introducing herself as Mrs. Avery, a retired elementary school librarian who'd lived in Portland her whole life. She pointed out murals on buildings, the bakery that had changed owners twice in 1 year, and the coffee shop that served the worst muffins in the city but had the friendliest cat. Eleanor listened quietly, warmed by the gentle rhythm of her stories. When they reached Mrs. Avery's apartment, an old brick complex shaded by ivy, Eleanor carried the bags up the stairs and placed them on the kitchen counter. "You're very kind," Mrs. Avery said, pressing her hands together. "These days, kindness feels like a rare currency." Eleanor looked down. "It doesn't cost much to be kind." "True," the woman nodded. "But it's hardest to give when you feel like no one sees you." That struck a chord. Before leaving, Eleanor helped unpack the groceries. Mrs. Avery handed her a small paper-wrapped bundle. "It's banana bread. Homemade. Take it with you." "I can't. You helped me carry my weight. Let me carry yours for a moment." Eleanor didn't argue. That evening, back in her cold apartment, she sat on the edge of her bed, the banana bread still warm in her hands. She took a bite. It wasn't perfect. A little too sweet. A little dry. But it reminded her of home, not just the house in Boise, but of the feeling she hadn't named in a long time, being cared for. Later that night, she picked up her journal. Day 15. Helped someone today. Carried her groceries. She said I reminded her of her granddaughter. She gave me banana bread. I think I needed that more than food. She stared at the last line for a long time before writing one more. Maybe I'm not as invisible as I feel. The heater clicked on weak, as always, but for once, the room didn't feel as cold. And outside, though the rain still tapped gently against the glass. It sounded almost like a lullaby. Chapter 8. The Collapse. The next week blurred into a cycle of early shifts, aching feet, and late-night bus rides. Portland's winter pressed in from all sides. A relentless cold that slipped through cracks in the window and settled into Eleanor's bones. She barely noticed the exhaustion at first. The little wins kept her going, Kim praising her for remembering a customer's complicated drink order, a regular leaving a folded tip with a smiley-face doodle, Mrs. Avery waving from her window with a thumbs up whenever Eleanor passed by. But underneath it all, her body was warning her. Skipping meals, chugging instant coffee instead of eating breakfast, falling asleep with her clothes still on, telling herself she'd rest tomorrow. Tomorrow never came. It was Friday morning when it happened. The shift had started like any other. She arrived at Brightside Brew before the sun was up, wiping down counters, brewing the first pot of dark roast, humming softly to distract from the pounding in her skull. By noon, the cafe was packed: students, freelancers, tourists. The hum of espresso machines and chatter filled the room. Eleanor moved on autopilot, smiling, nodding, memorizing names and milk preferences. Her vision began to blur as she rang up an order. A sharp throb stabbed behind her eyes. She reached for the counter to steady herself. "Ellie, you okay?" Kim called from the back. "I'm fine," she mumbled. "Just need some water." She turned toward the back sink. And the world tilted. Everything went white, then black. She woke up in a sterile room, blinking against fluorescent lights. The sound of beeping machines, muffled footsteps, and the quiet hush of nurses walking by told her exactly where she was. A hospital. She tried to sit up, but her limbs felt like wet sand. A nurse appeared beside her, kind-eyed and calm. "Hey there. You fainted at work. Your manager brought you in." Eleanor blinked. I'm fine. You're dehydrated. Low blood sugar. Mild gastritis. When was the last time you had a proper meal? She didn't answer. The nurse didn't push. "You'll need to rest tonight. We're keeping you under observation." As the nurse walked away, Eleanor stared at the 4 drip in her arm. Tears welled up, not from pain, but from the overwhelming weight of everything. She had worked so hard to prove she could survive. And her body had finally said enough. A few hours passed in silence. Then the door creaked open. A familiar voice, hesitant and raw. "Ellie?" Eleanor turned her head sharply. Nathan stood there. Older than she remembered, his eyes shadowed by worry and lack of sleep. His coat was soaked from the rain, hair plastered to his forehead, breathing uneven. For a second, they just stared at each other. What are you doing here?" she asked, her voice rasping. "I got a call from the hospital," he said, stepping closer. "Kim found my number in your emergency contacts." She looked away. "I didn't think you'd come." "Of course I came." The silence stretched. Nathan took a slow breath, pulling the chair beside her bed. "When I saw the name of the hospital, I thought it was too late." "You said I needed to learn on my own," Eleanor whispered, her voice shaking. "But maybe I'm not strong enough." Nathan reached for her hand. "You are. You've always been. But being strong doesn't mean doing it all alone." Her eyes finally met his. "I just wanted to be enough." "You were always enough, Ellie," he said, voice breaking. "I just wish I had told you more often." The tears came freely then from both of them. There were no apologies, no dramatic speeches, just fingers interlocked, just the silence of relief. That night, Eleanor fell asleep not to the sound of sirens or cold rain, but to the steady rhythm of her brother's breathing, curled in the chair beside her bed, refusing to leave again. For the first time in a long while, she didn't feel alone. She felt seen. Chapter 9. New Terms. The morning light that streamed through the hospital window was soft, almost apologetic, as if it knew the night had been long and full of tears. Eleanor stirred in her bed, the beep of the heart monitor her steady companion. Her throat still burned. Her body sore and heavy, but her eyes blinked open with a quiet clarity she hadn't felt in weeks. Nathan was still there, asleep in the hospital chair. He looked uncomfortable, one leg twisted under him, head drooping to the side, but he hadn't moved all night. His coat had slipped off his shoulder and lay crumpled on the floor. His hand, still wrapped loosely around hers, hadn't let go. Eleanor looked at him for a long time. For the first time in a long while, she didn't see the version of Nathan who had barked out schedules or hovered like a shadow over every choice she made. She saw her brother, the kid who once hid under the covers with her during thunderstorms, who stole candy from the pantry and blamed the dog, who fixed her bike with duct tape and a smile. The man beside her was tired, but still trying, just like she was. Nathan stirred a few minutes later, his eyes blinking open groggily. "You stayed," she said softly. He looked at her and gave a sheepish smile. "You think I'd let you wake up alone after that scare?" She tried to smile back, but her lips trembled. "I'm sorry." "For what?" "For running. For not calling. For pretending I didn't miss you." Nathan leaned forward, voice gentler than she'd ever heard it. "Ellie, I'm the one who should be sorry. I didn't listen. I didn't give you space to breathe." She shook her head. "You were scared." "So were you," he said. They sat in silence, letting the truth of that settle between them like a truce. No accusations. No need to dissect the past in painful detail. It had happened. They had both suffered. But now, they were here. Together. The nurse came in mid-morning to check Eleanor's vitals and declared she could be discharged by afternoon if someone took her home. "I'll drive you back," Nathan offered immediately. Eleanor hesitated. "Back to the apartment?" Nathan paused. "Only if that's where you want to go." She looked at him. "I want to come home." "But on new terms." He nodded. "Let's write those together." They stopped for groceries on the way back, real groceries. Nathan let her choose. She grabbed apples, eggs, rice, some actual vegetables. "No more instant noodles for a while," she joked. He chuckled, grateful for any sound that wasn't silence. Back in Seattle, the apartment didn't feel like a cage anymore. It felt like a reset. That evening, they sat at the small kitchen table with mugs of tea between them and a blank sheet of paper titled New Terms. Eleanor held the pen. "Okay. Rule 1. No schedules on the fridge." Nathan smirked. "Deal. But can I still leave sticky notes for reminders? Only if they have bad doodles on them." He raised an eyebrow. "You're setting me up for failure." She grinned. "It builds character." They wrote for hours. Nothing rigid. Just intentions. Talk when it's hard, not after it explodes. Respect each other's silence. Apologize sooner. Laugh more. Eat dinner together at least twice a week. Ask, don't assume. At the bottom of the list, Eleanor added one more. Choose love over control. Every time. They both stared at that for a long while. Nathan finally said, "I'll mess up sometimes." "So will I," she replied. "But we're not starting from scratch. We're starting from truth." Later that night, Eleanor curled up on the couch with a blanket and a warm plate of rice and eggs. Nathan sat beside her, flipping through channels on TV. It was quiet, but not the kind of quiet that hurt. The kind that healed. Chapter 10, A Visit from Mrs. Avery. The first thing Eleanor did after settling back into Nathan's apartment wasn't unpacking her bags or decorating her room again. It was writing a letter. She didn't quite know why. Maybe it felt safer than calling, or maybe it was her way of easing back into a world that hadn't stopped while she was gone. She kept it short. "Dear Mrs. Avery, I wanted to thank you for the banana bread, for the stories, and for reminding me that kindness still exists. I'm doing better now slowly. If you're ever in Seattle, I'd love to see you. With warmth. Eleanor." She dropped it in the mailbox that afternoon. And didn't expect a reply. But Mrs. Avery had always been full of surprises. The reply came in a week later, neatly folded paper inside a flower-patterned envelope, handwritten in cursive so delicate Eleanor had to squint. Dearest Eleanor, of course I remember you. You had eyes like someone learning to walk on a tightrope, fearful but full of promise. I don't travel often these days, but as it happens, my nephew lives in Seattle. I'll be visiting him this weekend. If you're free, I'd be delighted to meet for tea. With affection, Avery Green. Eleanor smiled when she finished reading. Then, after a moment's thought, she showed the letter to Nathan. He read it, then looked up. Tea with your secret grandmother? She's not my grandmother. Yet, he teased. Eleanor nudged his arm. I want you to meet her. Nathan blinked. Me? You stayed up all night in a hospital chair for me. I think you've earned banana bread approval. That Saturday, Eleanor and Nathan met Mrs. Avery at a small tea shop near Volunteer Park, sunlight pouring through the windows, the scent of chamomile and cinnamon floating through the air. Mrs. Avery wore a pale lavender sweater and a silver brooch shaped like a bird. Her smile was the same as Eleanor remembered, kind, slightly mischievous, and full of hidden wisdom. She rose to greet Eleanor with a warm hug. And this must be the brother, she said, turning to Nathan. Nathan, slightly awkward in his button-down shirt, offered a handshake. Nathan Reed. It's really nice to meet you. Mrs. Avery didn't take his hand. She hugged him instead. You looked like a boy lost at sea the day I saw Eleanor, she said gently. I'm glad you found your shore. Nathan's eyes widened, but he smiled. Yeah, so am I. Over tea, they talked. About Eleanor's new goals, maybe enrolling in community college, maybe looking into creative writing. About Nathan's work, how he was thinking of asking for fewer hours. About grief, and how it's not a mountain you climb once, but a hill you learn to carry every day. Mrs. Avery shared stories from her time as a librarian, how she once caught a fourth grader hiding jelly beans in a copy of To Kill a Mockingbird. She laughed so hard at her own story that Eleanor felt something lift in her chest, something she hadn't realized was still stuck there. As they walked Mrs. Avery to the park entrance, she turned and took Eleanor's hands in her own. You're becoming, she said. Eleanor tilted her head. Becoming what? Exactly who you were meant to be. Then she leaned in, whispering gently. Don't forget this moment. The peace, the people, the warmth. Hold on to it when the dark comes back. It always does. But now you'll have something to light the way. That evening, back at the apartment, Eleanor sat on the floor with Nathan beside her, sorting through a small box of old things she'd brought back, photos, keepsakes, and the now folded letter from Mrs. Avery. She handed it to him. He read it again. Slowly this time. You really are attracting wise older women, he joked. Maybe I'm just finally listening. Nathan looked over at her, more serious now. I'm proud of you. She didn't say anything. She just leaned her head on his shoulder. They didn't need music. Or words. The silence between them said enough. Chapter 11. A Call to Boise. The idea came on a quiet Tuesday afternoon. Eleanor had just finished reorganizing her desk again and was halfway through reading The Little Prince for the third time when her eyes lingered on a sticky note Nathan had left her that morning. Be gentle with yourself today. Anne. She smiled, peeled it off the mirror, and pressed it into the back of her journal. Then, without warning, her mind drifted back to Boise. To the house. To the bedroom that still probably had a dent in the wall from the time she threw her biology textbook in frustration. To the school she never properly said goodbye to. To the teacher, Ms. Hanley, who had once said, "You don't have to be fearless. You just have to be willing." And with that memory, the thought struck, what if I called her? Not to make plans. Not to go back. Just to close the loop. She sat on the edge of her bed, heart thudding, staring at her phone. It had been over 6 months since she'd spoken to anyone from Boise. Ms. Hanley's number was still in her contacts, tucked away under a sea of names she no longer needed. Her thumb hovered, then pressed. Ring. Once. Ring. Twice. A click. Hello, came a warm, familiar voice. Eleanor's breath caught. Miss Hanley, it's me, Eleanor Reed. A pause, then a delighted gasp. Eleanor. Oh my goodness, sweetheart, is that really you? Yeah, Eleanor laughed, tears welling unexpectedly. It's me. I've thought about you so often, Miss Hanley said, voice soft. I hoped you were okay. I'm getting there, Eleanor replied, voice shaking. I wanted to call, to say thank you. For everything. There was a long, thoughtful silence on the line. I don't need thanks. I just need to know you're safe. I am now, Eleanor said. I wasn't for a while. I tried to run. I thought if I left everything behind, I could outrun the grief. Ms. Hanley's voice grew gentler. That's what grief does. Makes us believe we can hide from what hurts. I'm trying to stop hiding, Eleanor whispered. You're doing more than that, Ms. Hanley said. You called. That takes more strength than you know. They spoke for nearly half an hour, about books, about writing, about the library reading challenge Eleanor had never finished. Before they hung up, Ms. Hanley said, You've always had a voice. Eleanor, I hope one day you'll use it to tell your story. Eleanor blinked away tears. Maybe I already have. Just not out loud. That night, Eleanor told Nathan about the call. He listened quietly as she spoke, then handed her a steaming mug of cocoa. You gonna write about it? I already did, she said, tapping her journal. He raised an eyebrow. Think you'll ever let me read it? Maybe, she smirked. When you stop burning the rice. Nathan laughed. So, never. Later, as Eleanor crawled into bed, she glanced at her phone one more time. This time, she opened her contacts and scrolled to a different name. Dad home. She hadn't deleted it, but she no longer felt like it haunted her. It was just part of the story now. And she was learning how to carry it. Chapter 12. Light in the hallway. It had started with a broken lamp. Eleanor was reaching behind the couch to unplug a charger when her elbow caught the edge of the small table. The lamp wobbled, toppled, and crashed to the floor in a soft crack of ceramic and silence. Shoot, she muttered, crouching to gather the shards. Nathan rushed in. Are you okay? Yeah, just a lamp casualty, she said, lifting a piece shaped like a crescent moon. I think this was Mom's. Nathan knelt beside her. His hands hovered over the broken pieces, but didn't touch them. She bought that at a yard sale. Said it looked like it belonged in a storybook. Eleanor smiled faintly. She always said everything had a story. There was a quiet beat. Then Nathan stood and disappeared down the hallway. When he returned, he carried a faded cardboard box marked Keeps, M and D in his handwriting. I was waiting for the right time, he said. I think this is it. They opened the box on the living room floor, cross-legged like children at a campfire of memories. Inside, Dad's old baseball glove. A postcard from Yosemite with a joke Eleanor had written at age 9. Mom's recipe notebook, smudged with flour, filled with cursive and crossed-out edits. A family photo Eleanor didn't even remember taking. Her, Nathan, and their parents on a picnic blanket, all laughing at something off-camera. Eleanor traced her fingers over the glossy surface. I forgot what her laugh sounded like. I haven't, Nathan said. But I used to play it in my head too often. Like I was afraid I'd lose it if I stopped. They didn't cry. Not because they weren't sad, but because, for the first time, the sadness wasn't sharp. It was soft, gentle, like the ache of an old song you still know all the words to. As the evening wore on, they rearranged the living room, clearing space on a shelf for the recipe book, the photo, and a small candle they lit together. I want this here, Eleanor said. Not just to remember them, but to remind us that we got through it. Nathan nodded. And that we're still getting through it. She leaned her head against his shoulder. Do you ever think about what they'd say? If they saw us now, I think Dad would be proud you can cook better than him, Nathan said. And Mom would say we're overdue for vacuuming, Eleanor added. They both laughed. Before going to bed, Eleanor stood in the hallway, staring at the soft glow of the candle still flickering on the shelf. It cast a warm pool of light, small but steady. She whispered to herself, "You're allowed to heal, even if the world still hurts." And she believed it. Chapter 13. Letters from the Past. A week after setting up the memory shelf, Eleanor was reorganizing Nathan's hallway closet, partly to find an old backpack, partly to avoid studying, when she spotted a small shoebox wedged in the corner behind a stack of old jackets. It was taped shut, marked only with a single word in her mother's handwriting. Private. Eleanor hesitated. The kind of hesitation that lives between curiosity and reverence. She turned to Nathan, who was nearby adjusting his bike tires in the living room. Hey, I found something. I think it was Mom's. He looked up. What kind of something? A box. Says private. Want to open it with me? Nathan stood slowly and joined her on the hallway floor. The tape peeled with a soft rip, dry from years untouched. Inside, layered neatly like petals in an old book, were letters. Dozens of them. Each in its envelope, dated. Some addressed to Michael Reed, their father. Some addressed to Eleanor. Some to Nathan. And a few to herself. They stared for a long moment. Then Eleanor whispered, "She wrote us letters." Nathan swallowed. When Eleanor pulled one out, the ink faded but legible, the paper smelling faintly of lavender and dust. The date in the corner, March 14th, 2016. She must have started years before the accident, Eleanor said. Nathan reached in and gently pulled out one with his name on it. Do we read them now? Eleanor nodded. One each. Eleanor unfolded the letter addressed to her. My dear Eleanor, if you're reading this, it means I've left the world earlier than I should have, and that thought aches more than anything. But since I can't be there to watch you grow, to hold your hand when the world is too loud, I wanted to leave behind my voice in words. You are gentle, stubborn, bright like spring light through a window. Never doubt the strength in that softness. The world will try to make you harder. Don't let it. And if someday you ever run from home, I won't blame you. But I hope you always find your way back. Love, Mom. The words blurred behind Eleanor's tears, but her heart felt strangely full, like her mother was in the room, whispering directly to her. Nathan sat quietly beside her, his letter still unopened in his hands. He looked down, then read aloud. My sweet boy, I know you carry more than you say. You always did. Even when you were 6 and pretended you weren't scared of thunderstorms, just so Ellie wouldn't be. One day, you may feel the weight of the world fall onto your shoulders. When that day comes, please remember, you do not have to carry it all alone. Let people in, especially your sister. She needs you, but you need her too. Love always, Mom. Nathan folded the letter carefully, reverently, and set it back into the box. Neither of them spoke for a while. There was nothing more to say. Only the shared heartbeat of two people sitting on a floor, surrounded by the paper ghosts of love that never got the chance to say goodbye out loud. That night, they left the box open on the coffee table, not as a wound, but as a door, one they could walk through together. Whenever they needed a reminder that their parents hadn't disappeared, they'd simply transformed. From presence to memory, from touch to words, from silence to story. Chapter 14, Sunday Soup and Second Chances. The idea came from a smudge. More precisely, a smudge of tomato paste on the corner of a recipe page, scribbled in their mother's handwriting. Sunday, only if rainy. Underneath, tomato basil soup. Add extra garlic when Nathan is cranky. Eleanor laughed out loud when she read it. Nathan, peering over her shoulder, groaned. She really documented my personality flaws in soup form. She weaponized garlic, Eleanor grinned. Honestly, iconic. It had been 2 days since they found the box of letters, and neither sibling had quite put the lid back on. Instead, they let it sit open on the kitchen counter. Like a third person living with them. Not haunting, just present. And so, on a particularly drizzly Sunday morning in Seattle, one that absolutely qualified, they pulled out the recipe notebook, tied mismatched aprons around their waists, and declared war on soup. 2 cloves of garlic? Nathan asked, squinting at the page. 4, Eleanor corrected. You're cranky today. I'm not cranky. You're arguing with a dead woman's recipe, Nate. He surrendered. The kitchen filled with the rhythmic sounds of chopping, the hiss of oil in the pot, and the kind of soft conversation that only happens when no one is trying too hard. Eleanor stirred while Nathan chopped basil like it had personally wronged him. She always made this when we were sick, Eleanor murmured. I didn't even like tomatoes back then. Nathan smiled. You used to secretly dump your soup into my bowl. You noticed? I had to eat 2 servings of that acidic mess and pretend I loved it. That's real sibling love. They both laughed, the kind that leaves a warmth in the chest long after it's over. The soup simmered for an hour. The apartment smelled like memory, sweet, sharp, familiar. As the rain tapped gently on the windows, they sat at the table with steaming bowls and thick slices of toasted bread. Eleanor took 1 bite and froze. It tastes like her. Nathan nodded, eyes glazed. It does. There were no more jokes. Just quiet spoons scraping porcelain, a few tears dropped into broth, and the silence of people remembering someone exactly the way she would have wanted, at the table, together. After lunch, Eleanor opened her journal and wrote, Day 38. Made soup. Not to eat, but to feel. It worked. She tapped the page with her pen once, then added, I think healing looks a lot like boiling tomatoes until they stop fighting you. That evening, Nathan stood in the hallway with 2 steaming mugs of cocoa and knocked lightly on her door. I was thinking, he said. Maybe we do Sunday soup more often. Like a tradition. Eleanor took the mug and curled into her beanbag chair. I'd like that. He lingered. And maybe next time, we invite someone else? She raised an eyebrow. You're seeing someone? He laughed. No, I meant Mrs. Avery. Eleanor smiled. Yeah, she'd like that. And, for the first time, the idea of adding more chairs to the table didn't scare her. It sounded like a promise. Chapter 15. The Community College Form. It started with a sigh and a yellow envelope. Nathan had dropped it on the kitchen counter casually one evening after work. Came in the mail for you. From Greenridge Community College. Eleanor stared at it, chewing the inside of her cheek. The same way she used to when their mom left report cards on the dining table, untouched until bedtime. She didn't open it that night. Instead, she tucked it between the pages of The Little Prince and told herself she'd look later. But later stretched into 3 days. On the 4th morning, Eleanor woke early, made herself a cup of tea, and sat on the balcony in Nathan's hoodie. The rain had paused for once. The clouds still loomed, but they felt like soft gray blankets instead of a threat. She pulled out the envelope and opened it. Inside, a welcome letter, a course guide, and a community login to register for the spring term. She read it all twice, then a 3rd time. The idea of going back to school stirred something uncertain inside her. It wasn't fear. Not entirely. It was the question she hadn't asked herself in a long time. Do I still get to want things? Not just survival, but dreams. Later that afternoon, she called Ms. Hanley. I got into Greenridge, she said quietly. I haven't enrolled yet, but it's real. MS. Hanley's joy through the phone was instant. That's wonderful, Eleanor. What are you thinking of studying? Eleanor hesitated. I don't know exactly. Writing, maybe. Psychology. Something that helps people like me. You don't need to know yet, Ms. Hanley said. You just need to keep showing up. Every brave day counts. Eleanor scribbled that into her journal later. Every brave day counts. That evening, Nathan found her at the kitchen table, the course list spread out before her, post-it stuck to every subject: intro to psychology, creative nonfiction, family dynamics, journal writing. He didn't say anything, just handed her a highlighter and sat down beside her. "I can help cover tuition," he said. Eleanor shook her head. "I'll apply for aid. But thank you." They worked in silence for a while, reading course descriptions and debating time slots like two nerds at a coffee shop. "You know," Nathan finally said, "Mom would have lost her mind seeing you take psychology. She always said you were her little therapist. She also said I had the attention span of a goldfish." Nathan chuckled. Two things can be true. At midnight, Eleanor sat alone in her room, staring at the confirm enrollment button on her laptop. Her hand hovered. She thought of all the things she'd survived. Sleeping in the cold. Banana bread from a stranger. Working till collapse. A hospital room with beeping machines and a brother holding her hand. And she thought, "I'm still here." Then she clicked. Confirmed. Spring semester. Enrolled. Day 42. I picked something. Not because I had to. Because I wanted to. That feels new. And terrifying. And mine. That night, as she drifted off to sleep, Eleanor dreamed not of the past, but of a classroom. A blank page. A warm desk lamp. And a version of herself who wasn't just surviving. She was writing. Chapter 16. Nathan's first missed alarm. The morning sun filtered lazily through the half-closed blinds, casting soft lines across the cluttered kitchen table. A forgotten mug with the remnants of cold coffee sat next to an open laptop, its screen displaying a calendar full of reminders and deadlines. Nathan groaned, blinking against the brightness as he sat up, rubbing his eyes. The sharp sound of Eleanor's alarm clock, set meticulously for 6:30 a.m., had gone off an hour ago. He'd missed it. Eleanor padded into the kitchen, still in pajamas, hair tousled, but eyes bright with amusement. "You're late," she said with a smirk, holding up a steaming mug of cocoa. Nathan tried to smile, rubbing the back of his neck. "Yeah, first time." She sat beside him, offering the cocoa like a peace treaty. "Don't worry," she said. "I've got your back." He sighed. "I don't know how you manage school and work." "It's messy," she admitted. "But I'm learning that it's okay to be messy." Nathan nodded, taking a sip. "Me too." The rest of the morning passed with tentative plans to share chores, set reminders for each other, and sometimes just accept that not everything would go perfectly. Nathan promised to try and not be too hard on himself. Eleanor promised to ask for help when overwhelmed. Together, they laughed over burnt toast and mismatched socks, a far cry from the rigid schedules of the past. That evening, as Eleanor studied and Nathan coded, the apartment felt less like a battleground and more like home. Small moments like these, the missed alarms, the shared coffees, the gentle understanding were slowly knitting their fractured family back together. Chapter 17. Unexpected Visitors. It was a cool Thursday evening when the doorbell rang unexpectedly. Eleanor and Nathan exchanged surprised glances. They weren't expecting anyone. Nathan got up to answer the door. Standing there was Mrs. Avery, holding a small basket wrapped in a checked cloth. "I hope I'm not intruding," she smiled warmly. "I baked some cookies and thought you might like some company." Eleanor's face lit up. "Please, come in." Mrs. Avery stepped inside, shaking off her coat and settling comfortably on the couch. They talked for hours, stories from Portland, memories of Boise, and gentle advice about moving forward. Mrs. Avery's visits became a new kind of tradition, a comforting thread weaving their days together. Eleanor realized that healing wasn't just about family, it was about the community that embraced them. Nathan smiled more often, and Eleanor found herself looking forward to the simple warmth of shared tea and laughter. Chapter 18. Quiet Revelations. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Eleanor sat by the window with a worn notebook in her lap. Nathan joined her with 2 steaming mugs of tea, handing one over with a gentle smile. "I've been thinking," Eleanor began softly, "about everything we've been through and all the things I never said." Nathan nodded, settling beside her. "Me too." They shared stories of fears, regrets, and hopes, things too fragile for loud voices, but powerful enough to heal. Eleanor revealed how lonely she felt despite Nathan's care. Nathan confessed how helpless he'd been watching her struggle. In the quiet, they found forgiveness for each other and themselves. The storm outside mirrored the cleansing within. By evening, the siblings sat closer, connected not just by blood, but by understanding. They were no longer alone. They were home. Chapter 19. A Step Forward. The morning sun spilled warmly through the kitchen window as Eleanor and Nathan prepared breakfast together, laughter filling the small apartment. For the first time in a long while, the silence between them felt comfortable, a shared space rather than a barrier. Eleanor glanced at Nathan, a quiet determination in her eyes. "I applied for that writing contest," she said, stirring the pancake batter. "It's silly, but I want to try." Nathan smiled, proud. "That's great. I'll help you edit it." As the day unfolded, they moved forward with small steps, mutual support, and a renewed sense of family. Together, they were building not just a house, but a home. Chapter 20. Homecoming. The train pulled slowly into the Boise station, its wheels rattling against the tracks like the heartbeat of a long-forgotten place. Eleanor stepped onto the platform, a small suitcase in hand and a heart full of both nerves and resolve. Nathan stood beside her, silent but steady, no schedules, no lectures, just a brother's quiet presence. They walked through the familiar streets, passing the old house now painted a faded blue, the garden wild but alive. Eleanor paused, inhaling the crisp air, memories flooding back, laughter, tears, fights, forgiveness. They stood before the front door, and for a moment, neither spoke. Then Eleanor smiled, "We're finally home." Nathan nodded, "Together." And as they stepped inside, the past didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt like a foundation, a place to build new stories hand in hand.